soul, your compass, your journey, your light. Today's guest is Johanna Bassols. She is a specialist in the semantics of consciousness. She approaches the understanding and personal development of higher consciousness in an integral and in a very practical way. She's a law graduate and an entrepreneur who found her life purpose in the most enlightening way through a process that she now teaches in her books and classes, and it is the activation of the DNA. Johanna is the founder of Healers of the Light, an alternative healing academy. She created a unique healing method for reprogramming energetic imbalances called the Soul Reprogramming Method. And she is the author of the series of The Power of Elevation of Consciousness. Johanna,
thank you.
I'm excited to have you here on my show. Welcome.
Thank you, Nico. I'm excited to be here too. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, I mean, what I really like about you is the whole way you work is so different than anyone else out there. And I could get information from you on a personal way, which had a huge impact for Petra and myself, a life-changing impact. And therefore, I was just really longing to have that podcast with you because you can share so many things which are helpful for our audience. And the audience are really spiritual people who are light workers who want to bring their message. And obviously, if you share your soul journey, your soul path, that helps them tremendously.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you again for inviting me. And yes, this is what I was just discussing earlier, that I keep saying it's so important for us to keep and search for our authenticity. We are always tempted to go with trends or to go with fashion and things that are out there. But we're really here because we have a unique message. And we have to find that truth, that uniqueness, because that's our mission. Our life purpose is to just be ourselves. But be ourselves doesn't mean to fall into the illusion of the identities that we create in this plane. Is to detach from those identities so we can actually be ourselves. And this is some of these explanations I share on my books. But I would like just to share with you some important things about this concept, because it's basically in everything that I say. I always convey the message that we create these emotional identities, or we identify with events or things that happen to us, and we end up believing that we are those things. And the time that we choose to believe that, then we are limiting ourselves to that event, and we disconnect from our true identity, which is what I call the true self. Our true self is no other than the true identity, the original persona that we had since the moment of creation. And we forget that because it's part of the process of human integration and part of manifestation, that when we come to this plane, we forget. But we don't forget completely. We have a feeling, we have an intuition about this original persona. And that has to be stimulated in order for us to fully embody that, to personify that frequency, that feeling. But we get distracted because there are so many things that happen to us in our life here, and we identify with our place of birth or our social conditions or anything, or even the roles that we create, like we are parents, we are husband or wife, we are students, we're this and that, and we believe in those roles and we live in them for as long as we want. And then when they fall apart, then we have this crisis, identity crisis. And as we get older, we start releasing all those identities because we cannot physically fulfill them anymore. So the process of aging is what really is teaching us to release identities. But if we were a little bit more proactive with our spiritual practice, with finding ourselves, with being more authentic, we wouldn't have to just let that to nature, to aging. We would be looking for that in a more proactive way. We would be trying to really see, what am I identifying with right now that is not me? And then just and you don't really have to know what you're looking for. You only have to know that you're not this identity. And organically, because it's our normal, natural, inherent capacity to recognize ourselves, we start looking, our soul starts looking for identity. And but while we're chained to certain false identities, we can't really see ourselves. And that's why I try to, even if sometimes is I run into the fact that people don't understand my point or might not agree, I still say it the way I feel like it should be for me, because we're here to share our perspective, our world, and with that authenticity, show other people that they can do the same.
And I agree. For me, it's also the only state to be a source of inspiration is to be your true, authentic self. Yeah, and it will evolve over time, but you need to connect with this inner voice and the calling, and then you have the connection to higher consciousness or soul, and depending on how you call it. When you say your true self, are you referring to the soul, or is it something different?
Well, the true self, now that I understand it more, because, as I've been in the search also, I have been getting some answers. And for me, and with what I found, the true self is consciousness. So consciousness is a state of being that is our original state, where we come from. In the moment that we were created, we were only an idea at some point. So that our original structure, where we come from, is expansive, is unlimited, is consciousness. But when we were created, only certain spaces of that consciousness came together. It's like when you imagine something, for example, you want to imagine right now a beautiful place, and then you're going to bring together water, trees, animals, whatever is a beautiful place for you. So these elements are like the spaces of consciousness for us that all together created our concept. And when I say the true self is all that defines us in that idea before we were physical. So it's like our concept, let's say. And everyone has a unique combination of this consciousness that is only created once for them, and that's defined in the moment of our birth. So when we are born, it's like, okay, this idea is completed. Now it's ready to be manifested. And that's different than personality. Personality is what we learn here to be like. We go to school, we learn from visualizing or observing other people. So it's a parallel concept to it.
I love it. Yeah, I also work a lot with Sigge Jung. I'm an insights discovery profiler. And there we talk also about a less conscious profile, and it's referred now to color preferences. But Sigge Jung explains this very well. And a conscious profile where we say this is how we want the world to see us right now. But if we can tap into the resource of the less consciousness, I think that's also more connected to what you are referring to on this, all the consciousness elements which you bring here to this incarnation.
Exactly. Yes. And it's interesting that you're mentioning Jung now, because I was sharing something about that yesterday too, and sharing about archetypes and all these identities that we create. And people ask me if in my books do I make any reference to the archetypes and the different identities, and I tell them no, because I believe in focusing in the solution and not so much in the problem. So Jung already developed a good explanation of what the problem is, like all these identities that we create and what they are. But I rather focus in how to bring about that original identity, the original persona, and not so much identifying the other things. But both ways, at some point, if you realize the problem, then you know that you are in it, and it brings awareness, or going to the solution and it brings you awareness too. So both ways take you to the realization of yourself or awareness of consciousness.
I mean, the way you share, I have goosebumps from head to toe. And although I'm blank at the moment, so I don't know exactly what you're referring to, but it was just, for me, it's a sign of confirmation where inside of me it says yes, wow. And I love this when this happens. Yeah. So Johanna, you talk about the the need to elevate our consciousness in the physical form. Can you explain a bit more about that? What do you mean in the physical form? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because we are here in the physical form because we need to disconnect from our true identity in order to reconfirm that identity. So we're here kind of losing ourselves to reconfirm our true identity so we can expand. It's like a process of compression. We come here in this form, we're compressed because we were expanded, compressed to be here and disconnect from who we are, and we forget everything, and we have a choice to choose ourselves again and say, I want to return to consciousness. And so that's the process of kind of giving you the freedom to choose, not knowing anything. It's a really interesting process where we go through, because we really are given total freedom to say, okay, you don't remember anything right now. How can you say, who you are? It's really so much a process of love, because it's like we were given a choice, and we do whatever we want with that. But in doing so, if we identify with a human form, we return to the human form constantly, come back to what we believe in. But if we identify ourselves with consciousness, then we expand and return to consciousness. That's why it is important is the only way to release the limitations of the human form is to identify ourselves with consciousness, because then that's when we return to it. It's a process of restitution, what occurs when we return to the places where we came from. So from this level of consciousness, we might think that no, I really want to continue identifying with the physical body and material things. But from a spirit level, this is like a jail. It's a very limited perception of ourselves. We could be more expanded. And there's a process of continuous expansion of forms until they are formless, until they are unmanifested. So it goes from manifestation to abstract to unmanifestation. And that's where the things or everything in nature is looking to get to a place of not limits, of complete expansion. And that's what they call eternity or unlimited.
So basically it's a process of undoing the compression to be full consciousness. Huh?
Exactly. So that's a process that could happen in many different stages. You know, we have the physical body, and is one of the forms in which we are the most compressed, because the more dense we are, the lower frequency we're in. So the more we loosen up, we expand. And this process, I shared it in my books in 3 different ways. And that's why the Power of Elevation of Consciousness is a trilogy. Because there I explain 3 different perspectives or angles of how to approach this path of elevation. And that's because I think that we have 3 main aspects. And one of them is our soul, then which is the intangible aspects of ourselves. And then we have our physical aspect, which is the physical body. And then we have a third aspect, which is our perception, our consciousness, human consciousness. So in each one of the books, I share ways that are practical in which we can stimulate that connection to consciousness. For example, in the first one, we're working with all the soul elements and how to detach from identities that the soul could have created, especially emotions. So the most powerful or the ones that crystallize more are emotions for us. When we do something or something happens to us, only we remember it if there is an emotion associated with it. If it's sad or it's happy or something, that's what really makes it stay with us. So, and realizing this allowed me to also understand its connection with the physical body, because there is a release of neurotransmitters that happens every time that we go through a certain emotion. And that release of neurotransmitters is what makes it crystallize in some part of the body. Then we start creating cellular communication. It's like our cells understood that you identified yourself with the event or emotion, and then they start creating a message. And that message becomes part of your body. So you are now with your body showing the world your message. And if you believe in it, then it's part of you. And that's why we say you are what you believe. And it's true, because it's showing not only in your behavior, but now it's showing in your cellular communication too. And that's what I developed in the second book that hopefully is going to be released in the next month. It is finished, but I'm just waiting for some final elements there, and then hopefully it'll be released. And so knowing this cellular communication can be affected or is created by our neurotransmitters and all these hormones, I use that same communication to create patterns that we actually want to record in ourselves. So it's not only that we have the ability to understand how this process works, but we can use it. So I use the different neurotransmitters. For example, let's say adrenaline. Adrenaline could cause fear, or it could also release fear. So I use a way of triggering adrenaline in my own body through certain poses that cause pain in my muscles, for example. And I use breathing techniques and pain in order to release adrenaline, and I can record a message there. I can say, I am no longer limited by this thought, or I am free from this belief, or I am in perfect health, or anything that you want. So you're using a neurotransmitter to record a message in your body. And that's what we're doing in the second book. It's really interesting how that knowledge came, because it's so powerful that with a few tries, you can really just put a message in your body and it starts working on its own. It's really amazing. And realizing that we do that all the time without knowing.
Yeah, I love the way you explain that. I mean, it's so clear also the connection between the soul, the emotions, the neurotransmitters, but then also to understand why it works on a cellular level. I mean, I found that now so clear. I think that's a unique gift of yours, just to really make very complex elements and bring it to the world in a very clear fashion. Excellent. Thank you.
Yes, for me it was an amazing discovery, and it made so much sense, because I always had all these emotions, and now I know that sometimes I'm writing and I have an emotion triggered. I'm like, why is this some imaginary thing? And I realize that this is happening because I'm recording the information as I go. So while I'm triggering these emotions with just thoughts that pop into my mind, I guess it's some process that I know how to do intrinsically, and that is like a way of recording whatever I'm writing or my own message in my body through these emotions that I'm releasing. But it's just images, or even sometimes like a geometric figure that triggers some emotion. And then I realized, okay, maybe I have this level of communication that is a little bit more advanced. And I sometimes don't try to understand everything. I just accept it. And it has allowed me to move forward a little bit faster, because if I try to stay in a level to understand everything, we just would be like trying all day. There's so much to understand that sometimes you just keep moving and just enjoy things that are happening, and something inside of you has the answer. So I don't really worry about it too much. I try to explain as much as I can, which is the big picture, but then within that there are other things that are happening that are going to be experienced only and not so much explained. And and that's what then we move into the third vision, that is the third book, that is Elevation of Consciousness. And in that book I talk about perspective, because once we have already cleared the identities, not only from the soul but also from the physical body, we start seeing things different. But we not necessarily accept it, and people go into this period of, I don't believe what I'm seeing, I don't trust myself, I hear a voice or something, but I don't know if it's just my mind. So there's a process of denial there, and we have to overcome that denial to accept ourselves fully. And that's the third part of the process. Okay, now that you have freed yourself from all these limitations, are you ready to accept yourself and embrace it and expand it? So, and that's the third part.
Yeah, and I think the more we see results, or the more we feel when we go through processes like this, the more we are confident of what we receive. And because it is, the conscience gets bigger and it's more on an awareness level. And then it's something which no one can take away from you anymore. And you go into this phase of doubtless awareness, where you then all of a sudden yes, that's it, and then the mind cannot play with you anymore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, mind will always try to play tricks, but it's not so much. It's a process of you learning how to manage that, and once you have already got built some temperance or some self-control, then those things start happening less and less. And that's why all the time, whenever I have a chance, and in all my books, I talk about the importance of lowering our brain impulses. And brain impulses can be triggered by different things, especially thoughts, emotions, and the food we eat. And I always make a focus on trying to eat foods that are not addictive, foods that don't trigger that activity in the brain. Like sugar, for example, is probably one of the worst. And then I always talk about alcohol, chocolate, coffee, gluten, animal products. There are a lot of things, but we became used to them and accepted them as okay to eat, but it's not necessarily that because everyone is doing something that is a good thing to do.
Yeah, it's my wife Petra, she's on a mission there with a complete cleansing process. I'm still following, so I think coffee is one of the last things I'm doing. But in her presence, I sense with the food is so healthy that my awareness is different, and also I'm not in so different moods. I'm way more stable. Yeah? But also see an very empowered light worker is really, they don't believe anymore in their thoughts. If something is coming, they have their ways to just really open them again and be in a resourceful state. And I think you're a role model on providing tools how to go there and be more resourceful with what's written in your books, and then how to have an elevation of the consciousness.
Yes, definitely. It's something about it because we have this close. We're a physical body, so anything that we eat, obviously, is just like a thought that we have affects our behavior. Anything that we eat is going to affect our physical composition, and we are that we eat, just like we create this cellular communication with our neurotransmitters. The food that we eat also releases these neurotransmitters. So, and this is something that I developed clearly. So I looked for 8 kinds of neurotransmitters that are the most impactful in the body, and I chose to use those because we are triggering them constantly during the day, like adrenaline, norepinephrine, for example. And it's just a way of using that information to emphasize a message for yourself. So let's say I want to record something in a pattern in my cellular communication. So I'm going to eat foods that trigger certain kind of neurotransmitter during 30 days. I'm going to use my exercises of triggering this neurotransmitter, reinforcing the message. And by the end of those 30 days, I will have created a pattern. So it's a way of using your information. It's like no one is really looking for expanding or using the full capacity of what we have. We have such an amazing system here, and we're just feeding it anything. And there's so many things that we can do with that information. It's amazing.
Yeah, wonderful. There's another fascinating topic you're working with, and this is autism. And you said that you think that autism is a sign of evolution. Can you bring a bit more light into that?
Yes, and it's something that I wasn't even aware of this at first, but when I started writing the books, and even from the first information I started receiving, this was such a clear message about that I had to also go through a process of understanding more about autism and why would this be a sign of evolution. And the fact is that people with autism, they have a capacity of perceiving energy and feeling their environment and connectedness with everything that is impressive. Like they are able to sense energy in 3 or 4 times much more than anyone else, and they can also express that energy, and that's why they feel a little bit restricted sometimes, or they're overwhelmed with what's happening, because we are right now in an overflow of all these different energies, and they just don't have the ability right now. It's like our physical body is not there yet where this can be filtered in a way that is manageable, but it's like we're going there, and it's the process of evolution that is already starting to affect our capacity physically and mentally. So we're seeing that because of the evolutionary forces, things are changing around, but we are still like adapting. So it could be a process of many years, maybe even hundreds, for the physical body to become where it is, where it has to be in order to use this capacity instead of fighting with it. And so it's going to be a process of restructuring of the physical body. Yeah, but I also noticed that when I have applied energy therapy to people with autism, especially helping the parents and people in charge to understand how the foods and all these processes work in order to help them become more a better channel of these frequencies, instead of like rejecting them and going through this process of rejection of them. So the process of cellular activation, which is the second book that I'm writing now, really has helped them be able to manage frequencies of higher level, which right now anyone could feel a little bit overwhelmed. Even people without autism will feel overwhelmed to receive such high level. And I noticed that also this is bringing about other conditions like bipolarity, for example. Bipolar people feel that they have these enhanced state of focus, that they can do something and they're really focused on something, and they create these wonderful things, and they come up with these ideas that are incredible, but at the same time that leaves them completely drained out, and then they are in a process of depression, and it's like a yes and no polarities all day. So they're not still ready to regulate that. That's another sign of how to use higher frequencies. So some people are more sensitive and able to perceive this than others, and autistic people are one of them, and they have a way of showing love and affection, and it's just like incredible. I had a chance to observe many of them, and it's incredible how they can communicate without restrictions once they feel comfortable and they're in an environment when they feel safe. And for that, we have to be really aware. Many parents don't know this, but they're so sensitive to frequency, and everything is really a frequency: lights, sounds, smells. So even products, though, sometimes we use to clean the floors, or things that are smells that are in the rooms could affect their comfort. So we have to be really aware of these things to allow them to express that uniqueness. I'm completely sure that probably in a couple of years they will be bringing some of the newest information, and the most breakthrough information will come from people that can actually perceive frequency, because the information travels in that form. It's not what we learn in school. That's what we were told here. But everything that I've been learning now, it has nothing to do with what I learned in school. I went to law school. I learned a lot about law and politics, philosophy and history, which of course helped me with my life here. But there is another type of information that comes without books or without anything, and it comes to you once you allow it, and it comes in the form of frequency. And to be able to decode that is the new way of learning.
Johanna, I just have the sense I receive a healing by what you just said, because I'm so hot, I'm sweating all over. And the thing is, and I'm touched also, emotionally touched. I'm so hypersensitive that for years and years I didn't know how to live. Yeah, but then finally I managed. So I wish I would have met you 30 years ago to gain more clarity. But it's also, I'm so grateful that my wife is so understandable, because sometimes certain smells, it's just they trigger my instinct, yeah, and I cannot react properly anymore. And so I found a way to navigate through everything which is happening around me, be it vibrations of other people, scent, energies, and I'm more resilient now. But still, something, when you explained this, was so deeply triggered that it's almost like I feel a release. And now it's almost, I feel grateful for what I used to think is a mistake.
Of course, yeah. It is a enhancement. The way that you can use the systems is a gift. Now you just have to find a way to expand it and stimulate it more. So lately I had probably this week I worked with three different clients or people that came to see me for energy healing that were dealing with too much, sensing too much energy, and they felt overwhelmed and they thought something bad was being done to them. And I explained to them that we are going through that process of acknowledgement, awareness of our talents, our gifts, and who we are. And there is a little transition between that and that in which you feel overwhelmed because it's not your regular, it's not how you feel every day. You know, something different is happening and then you feel that it's bad, but it's not necessarily bad. And I explained to them that they have to let go of judgment of frequencies because they're not good or bad. They're just frequencies. Yeah. So feeling them and allowing them to be and releasing the identification with what you think is good and bad, it allows them to just bring you the message. What are you really trying to? Why do you have this ability? Maybe you can read beyond what is in front of you, and you can, in that smell or in that light or in that sound, you can get your message, answer your question. It's a question that you're responding to with that.
Profound, very profound. Thank you for sharing that. So you talked before about that we have parallel identities. Yeah. So why do we need them? Why do we create them? So because you mentioned already one way out of that, but what's the bigger purpose, and what can we do to be more clear about that?
Well, the parallel identities is something that happens naturally, and we understand it as personality. So it's all the collection of experiences and emotions and learning that we have, and that becomes our personality. We identify with those temporary events. And that's why there is so much said in all Eastern religion about not identifying with the temporary, with what's temporary, but there was not much explanation of what is that. So identities are temporary. Any identification that you create with things that are circumstantial, those are egos, basically. So we don't have one ego, we have several egos, several identities. And the more we disconnect from those identities, then we can allow ourselves to recognize the original persona which is behind that. And that's one of the practices in my first book. I say, try to define yourself without any words. How can you come to an understanding of yourself without using words? Because words are identities. Words are defining, are limiting, and they're just giving you boundaries. But if you can release those, and then you can just experience what yourself feels like, then there is a knowing. And stimulating that is what is called a state of awareness, being aware of that original persona or the original identity comes with a state of no identification with the physical realm or anything temporary. And that's why you see meditation being like, okay, I'm going to meditate and I don't even feel that I'm in my body anymore when I meditate. That's a successful meditation because you have released yourself from the identity of the physical body during that time.
So when you say, so understanding who are you without using words, what are you, is it about then feeling, or is it like a consciousness? Realization, yes.
Yeah, an awareness. So a state of awareness is a consciousness. You're aware of consciousness, you are consciousness. So you're not limiting. You can't define consciousness with a word. You can say it is or it isn't something. It's just something that is. But you can't really define it with, it will be limiting. It will be almost an insult to try to define consciousness with words. And we are that too. So the more we try to define ourselves with a role or a name or something like this, it's also an insult for us as a limitation. But we like to live there. We like to be there, and we suffer and we find ourselves in there for the longest time until something happens and the identity breaks. And then we have this period of crisis, like, wow, now I don't know who I am. I just lost my identity that I had for 30 years. I thought I was this thing that was professional. I lost my job and I'm no longer that. So I don't know who I am for a period of time. And you either have the choice there to find yourself another identity that is also temporary and cling to that identity and repeat the entire process, or not, and just allow yourself to connect to your true persona and go back to the origins, and that's when many people have this crisis of, they say the 30, the 50 years, all these years when we go to different periods of time in which we don't know who we are. And those are the best times, because immediately after that we have a realization, oh, I found what I like, and in reality we only found like 1% of that, because there's so much more there, and there could be hundreds and thousands of spaces of consciousness that are part of our original composition that we haven't even started channeling or embodying. So if we just release all identities here, we could become that message.
Okay, so that's the message. Release all the identities and connect with the pure awareness or higher consciousness. Wow, that's a nice gateway to just feel the essence of who you really are.
Yes, and it's not something that is only abstract, because it brings you also programs for experiencing that in different aspects. Remember, we're multidimensional, so if you allow yourself your soul to find its true identity, your physical body will also resonate in that level. Organs will be working in a certain way to show that. Then also your perception will be allowing you to see yourself as that. And then actions and thoughts and everything that is an expression of you will also represent that. So your doing will be that purpose. Your vision, your expression, manifestations, everything that you do will also represent that original persona. So that's when, for example, I write, and my book represents who I am in words. So that book is me. It goes out in that way. Or I'm talking to you right now in this interview, and this is me also in a message. That's why we allow ourselves to be completely free, and we do have to do this work in order to, not only for us, but for like for the community and for the larger plan that we have of being part of something bigger. It's like, okay, we're needed, our frequency is needed in order for us to allow others to also find themselves. When they see us, when they see someone that is 100% themselves, and they feel that they also want to do that, and they start becoming that truth, and that is just, affects your environment, affects the people that are around you, the place, everything, it changes everything in the place where you are, and without you even having to say a word. It's just your presence is something that people can catch up, and then it heals. People heal just from being next to you, because your truth, you're a true message.
Yes, yeah. That's also what I sense more and more from the light workers. It's just by them being present in the room, things are happening with other people. It's like different instruments, and you have one music instrument, and the others resonate. And the more we are in that authentic self, the more this is going to happen. Yeah.
Yes.
What I'm curious is about, what was the life-changing moment for you when you are a lawyer, and from that profession of being a lawyer, that you make this total shift into becoming this conscious person and developing DNA stuff and spiritual work?
I know, what a big change. Well, I think I had a period of complete disconnection from that identity, and I was working in my real estate business. I have a real estate company where I do real estate investments, and I think it was the busiest time, or the busiest year I had. Our clients were buying and selling hotels, large deals, and I was so focused into that I was completely in autopilot. I wasn't aware of myself, but I was feeling a little bit depressed, and I dealt with depression for years, and I didn't know why, and I thought it was just, maybe hormonal, whatever, it could be natural. I said, maybe I'm eating terrible. So I started making changes. I started doing all this process that I explain now in the books. I started following a change in my diet. I changed everything, and I started feeling more and more aware of that message. And I think there was a day in which I was just the busiest. I had like 3 phone calls at the same time. It was something crazy. And I just it's like someone disconnected me, unplugged me from that, and I couldn't identify with that anymore. It was immediate. It took like a second, and I had at that moment all the realization of myself, because I allowed myself to disconnect from that in that period of time. It was like a window of maybe seconds in which I decided not to be that anymore. And I said, what if I'm not longer doing this anymore? What's going to happen? And then I received all this information. Then you are yourself. If you're not going to do that, then you can be yourself. And this is what you're going to be doing. And for some time was difficult for me to understand, okay, so how am I going to live? Because I still have to maintain certain things that are commitments, obligations that I have agreed to. And so I have to still fulfill those. And so, of course, the first reaction is you just want to leave everything and go and do whatever you want. But I couldn't do that. And I said, I'm going to go into this gradual process of balancing everything, because I think that we're here to also share in our regular lives, with the world. It's not that we're here to go in a mountain and hide there, because some people have that type of purpose, but I didn't feel that mine was that. I feel that mine was more being in the mix with everyone and sharing the message in a more in this level in which people can relate to, because it's needed here. So I said, okay, I'm going to try to balance all this and remain and do both things. And it was a really difficult process. I almost had to create like two brains, because I couldn't think of, in one aspect of me, I couldn't just be answering a phone call and also writing a book. That's not going to happen. It's like you have to make a change, a switch of complete personality in order to be able to do that. So I had to give myself a schedule, and I said, okay, from all these times I'm going to be 100% focused on this, and then the rest of these hours I'm going to be able to do these things. And it has been working, and for me, has been working so far. But it was a life-changing moment. I lost all my ambition for material things, for money, for things like this. I don't know. It was like I don't care anymore. Like if we have furniture that looks nice or not, or if we have this. So it's like, what happened to you? I really don't know. But I don't care about those things anymore, and I'm glad, because those were only things that made you a slave of yourself. Like you had to work more for those things that don't matter. Or don't matter to me at this point. I don't know, depending on everyone's perception. And that's why I tell you, what you believe makes you tied to that belief. So I don't believe that those things are important for me anymore, because I lost that identity. And it was so profound that once you lose an identity, you can't really return to that. It goes away, it's gone.
1 second. That's it. So once you lose an identity, it's gone, and you cannot return, and something new is created.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
So how did it then happen so you had that window of opportunity, you had this realization, a self-realization. How did that lead you into have this tremendous knowledge and expertise with DNA?
Well, this is what DNA activation is. The DNA activation, and now that I understand it more as I've been writing so much about it, is the connection to those spaces of consciousness. Actually, it's the activation, because we are always connected to who we are. The spaces of consciousness that created us are always connected to us, but they're not active because we have chosen a different identity. So let's say if I have a space of consciousness that says that I am able to receive information from the universe, but I have another identity that I created here that says, in order for me to learn things, I have to go to school, and this is the only way in which I'm going to learn. So I can't have two opposite beliefs about myself, because it's impossible. So you choose one or the other. And for this time, I was believing that, or I believed that I could only learn through this process, which is a regular process that everyone learns. But then I said, I'm going to release that identity too, and I allow myself to receive this knowledge. And it's like, okay, now just sit there and write. And I was writing, and I couldn't believe the things that I was seeing, because it was like, wow, this is. And the more I wrote and wrote, I realized that it was me. It's like I'm writing my own story in in this book, in this form. It's like a story about who I was before I was human, where I was coming, where do I come from, or like my origin. So it's like an explanation about my own existence in just in a more abstract way. And we see it as abstract because we don't understand ourselves without our form. But the more that we lose that identity too, then we realize, oh, okay, before I had this illusion of form, then I was something else. And if that explanation, it was just simply me writing my biography of when I was an element in consciousness.
Mm. Yeah, and when you write, you are on a stream of consciousness. I don't know if people can see this here. So one thing is, which I downloaded and I received it for free, and for the listeners out there, if you register on the Healers of the Light, and I will send the link there as well under the podcast, you basically can download a basic guide of restructuring your DNA. And this is just really, how to say that here, but it's just really profound information. For me, it's very clear, although I had to read it 3 times to allow it to digest on a cellular level. Yeah, but for me, it's all about feeling. I feel stuff. Yeah. So, and then sometimes I just need time to digest. I don't need to do anything, but if I pick it then up a second time and I read the same thing, all of a sudden it goes, this is what she's referring to, and how I can connect this. Yeah. So for every listeners, this is a fantastic a guide. It's even free of charge if you register. And I will put the link in there. I also I will put the Amazon link below in the podcast for the power of the elevation of consciousness. And the first book is the Soul Restructuring, which is an amazing book. And people can order this then in Amazon. Can you summarize the book? Is basically what we discussed so far is all mainly part of the book as well. Yeah.
Yeah, soul restructuring is the first part, which is related to the soul. There I developed ways of detaching the soul from identification with emotions and also memories and thoughts. But instead of focusing so much in the negative emotions or in the events that created the identities, I focus in how the soul would look in its perfect state. So we go through visualizations and meditation and breathing exercises where I guide you in a way in which you can visualize the soul being released from these identities. And of course, that also there is a process of internalization. It's like you can reach that with different ways. If you want to use the consciousness and go into a psychotherapy and then you realize, oh, I created that identity, and then you choose to let it go, you can do that. But if you go to your soul, because your soul is like your storage of intangible information, you can go there and say, I reset this and I let go of everything that is there. I don't even care what it is. I don't need to know when I recorded it. I just let go of everything that is there and I have a brand new disc. I don't need anything. It's just a visualization process, but it's so powerful because it's like you're talking in the same language. Emotions are also intangible. You can't see them. You can't see thoughts. You can't see ideas. So visualization and meditation is the way that you communicate at the same level of those intangible elements. So that's what we do in soul restructuring, completely changing the structure of the soul to release identities and allow yourself to connect to the true identity, the true self.
Fascinating. So one element which is unclear to me is you said that this soul basically needs to release elements. In my understanding, but maybe it's an identity, I believe my soul, this is the most holistic and perfect part of me. But you're saying basically that there identities in the soul which need to be released to be in full consciousness, or how can I understand?
Yes. Our soul has layers. So our soul is our intangible aspect. So we have layers that start with the electromagnetic field that is around us. Then we have all these layers, the astral body, mental body. We have the psychosomatic body. So they're like, it's like a kind of filter. And you probably are thinking the soul as the spirit, which is the life force, which is even more perfect. There you can't really record anything else than just life. But your soul is your intangible. And so when you go to the process of detaching from the physical body, then you are experiencing life through the soul. The soul is like the way in which you see that. But if you continue the process of elevation of consciousness, your soul will also detach, and you continue only as a spirit because it's contained within it. So it's less tangible and less tangible.
I got it. I know where it comes from. That in a German language, I think there's a different understanding with soul and spirit. So you differentiate between soul and spirit. Yeah, is that correct?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it will be like going from a more dense to a less dense until you are light, and then until you convert or you transform into the unmanifested, that there's nothing there. And that's like the process. Leave the physical body, leave the soul, go in the levels of the spirit, and then unmanifested reality, which is not created. But at the same time, being not created allows you to not have to dissolve, because there is no creation, there is no dissolution. So that's the most expansive state where you could be, the nirvana, which they call. So,
beautiful. Wonderful. I mean, I could talk for hours. So, Johanna, you're also the Healers of the Light, basically. That is your website, that's your work. But in that, you also create a community or an academy, a healing academy. So what can I expect? So I'm a member of the academy. So is Petra. But how is it evolving in the future as we go along? What is the benefit for a listener to become a member of your academy?
Yes, the Academy has the purpose of bringing enlightenment and bringing more information. So I share with my members on a daily basis different thoughts and different wisdom comes directly from the highest levels of consciousness. I meditate on a daily basis, and I receive a message, and I transform it into something that can be understood in a very simple way, and I share it, usually in the form of a graphic or an infographic or something that can be understood. And that's part of what I share with Healers of the Light. But there we also have classes, online classes, where I develop the books a little bit more, because some people are easier. They have this ability to read and understand everything, but other people really prefer to have a more direct experience. So I develop the classes there too. And the other things that I will definitely be adding there will be more of commentary in different topics, because now that I am more clear about really myself, like basically understanding myself, I feel like I can have, I can see through this non-identity, but through this consciousness, I can see how things could be explained in a different way. And I can see a lot of confusion in a lot of different topics or theories, and I think that I will be developing those more, just because I think that there's so much wisdom out there that hasn't been really used, and that could be, a little bit more clear for people that are in the path of elevation or in the search for spiritual development. So I will be always, improving and adding more things, and hopefully more videos too, and things that are just tools where people can connect to. And ideally, I will also like to do more events like this, conversations, because we get to answer so many questions like this. And even beyond what you and I are saying here, there are other questions that are being answered at a soul level to this conversation. People they're just dragging or making their own conclusions of things that I am saying, things that you're asking, and that's a different conversation that is happening beyond what you and I are saying here. And that's the beauty of these things, or communication itself, is that people can have other levels of communication while this is going on.
Yeah, that's also my vision and my desire with the podcast, is to have an impact on a level of frequency, or with frequency, that people receive sometimes an awakening. And I get that feedback that people say, wow, I listened to that and they felt something. It's not only that they got information, but it's more about feeling. And you're right. I mean, also what I experienced when you talked about autism, I didn't know exactly what happened, but I just had such a heat wave in my body, and something was released, and I need to ponder on that afterwards. But I'm also grateful for this, that things like this can happen just by having a conversation with a virtual tool. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
So, and
And
that,
this is something that I learned recently that I was not aware of that, but I guess it's another part of my, how perception or consciousness, it keeps waking and going higher and higher. So as part of that, I keep answering questions to myself with just being aware of things. And I realized that in relationships, or the reason why we actually meet people, even if we don't say anything, is because we have soul questions, soul level questions that need to be answered. And sometimes with our words, sometimes with our presence, sometimes with just being in the same space, those questions are being answered. So there is never a meeting with someone that didn't have a reason to be or a waste of time. There is always why you're there. There's always a why your soul is answering its own questions. And now every time that I go to a place, I start hearing myself saying, you just answered this question, or you just answered that other question. And I'm like, wow, interesting. I didn't know that I had that question. But sometimes I wonder, like, why am I here? And then it's because you needed to answer the question about this and that. And I'm like, okay, that makes sense. So it's interesting, this new communication that I'm having with the spaces now. Because before I wasn't really aware of the space that much, but then I realized, okay, I'm having a communication with the space where I'm in, and this space is answering my need for something interesting.
This is so aligned, this resonates, it lands so deeply, because what I'm sensing since a couple of years is everything I do is a field experience. So also if I do a workshop, I create a amplified field of soul resonance, or we create that, every participant. And then something happens in the field, which alone is not so easy to accomplish. And when you just say you talk from a field, or you are in a field, and you use this as your source, this just really lands with me.
Yes, I'm glad it was so enlightening, this conversation. It's great for both of us. I'm sure I'm answering questions too with your presence.
Yeah. So are you still doing one-on-one coachings, or?
Yes, I'm still doing that. I've been doing also the classes in small groups, which has been great. We have had such a great time because I've been doing like a 6-week webinars or 4-week webinars where I can really see the progress in what we're doing, an alignment with all the people and having similar experiences. And that really, really has helped in my research also, because it has helped me understand that the more we stimulate certain frequency, it activates. And this was a time in which I felt that was perfect for the activation of the first book, Soul Restructuring. So 6 weeks and meeting once a week would allow me to really perceive the change in people. And everyone in that class was like, wow, I really feel like something changed. But so this confirms the fact that a frequency can be stimulated until it's activated, and that's what DNA activation means. DNA activation is the constant stimulation of awareness, state of awareness, and you can reach that. And constant stimulation of DNA activation, you reach elevation of consciousness. It's a path. And so yes, I still do the one-on-one coaching, but I always tell people, if you do like 3 or 4 times, then we can work in developing something. If you only want to learn something one time or have doubts, of course, we can answer those questions in one. But I have people that I see for almost a year or so that are coming all the time because they're doing so great. They have been, and they have, they're not so good in groups. They prefer to answer their own questions. They don't have the time to deal with other people's questions. Everyone is in a different
different preferences. Yeah, so I will make sure that all the links to connect with you will be on the homepage with the podcast and the release. Also the link from Amazon with the Elevation of Consciousness and the book of the Soul Restructuring. Johanna, I feel inspired. You're just such a source of wisdom, and I could spend hours and hours, and I think we need to make a part 2 at one stage. I feel very grateful for our conversation and for your time. Thank you so much. Namaste and all the best to you.
Thank you. I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'll be looking forward for part 2.
Thank you, Johanna.
Thank you, Nico. See you soon. Bye, everybody. Thank you.
your soul, your compass, your journey, your light.